Hello and welcome back to the Master Division of the International Championship. It is now already quite a while ago since I showed you the first two games of that season. And before we are going to take a look at my situation, first of all, congratulations to Krotz, because as you can see, he played an insanely strong season, won 6 out of the 7 games. In the one game, in a three-player game where he finished second, he was only 2 culture away from winning it. So he was only 2 culture away from just clean sweeping the Master Division. So an extremely strong performance by him. And he will now be moving to the Grandmaster Division. For myself, I don't know if you remember the games that I have shown, but in both games I was somewhat happy about my position, but then at the end it just didn't go, had the greatest outcome for me. And actually in both games I finished exactly 2 culture behind Ipogi, so for the start I thought I had some solid games, but just didn't get some great results out of it. After that, I just had some bad games where I got some bad results out of it, and now, as you can see, after 5 games finished with 2 games remaining, I am in a position where I am at the last position in the table with only having scored 4 points out of 5 games, which is of course something I'm not very happy about. The only good news is for me that both Danny Boy and Takusto also didn't really have the greatest season, so I still have chances to overtake them. In the last 2 games, I will encounter Danny Boy 2 times and Takusto 1 time. And if I should manage to place before them in those games, then I still have decent chances to overtake both of them and at least not finish among the last 2 players who will get relegated. And today we are going to take a look at the 3-player game against Danny Boy and Morta Pêcheur. And yeah, of course, ideally I really need to win it or at least finish before Danny Boy. That would be very important. And after that game, I will then also reveal how the last 4-player game played out, and we will see how the season ended. Alright, but now without further ado, let's take a look at the game. Alright, as you can see, I'm playing in the first position. And let's first of all take a look. We are going to take a look at the leaders and wonders. Also, I have to note that it's already a while ago now until the game has finished, and of course the early turns are even longer ago. So it could be happening that I might be missing some of my reasonings, but I just took a replay, of course, as always before the recording. And I think I remember most of the important stuff. Alright, in H3 we have some lab leaders. Bill Gates, Sid Meier's, Steve Jobs, Einstein, Marie Curie are all there, as well as the spaceflight and the Manhattan Projects, a lot of science energy, not a single theater leader. There is the Hollywood, but not really a lot of support in H3. We then also have both Pierre and Mandela. In H2 we have some culture leaders. There's Shakespeare and Antoni Gaudi. We also have Newton, who can maybe set up nicely for those H3 science leaders. We also have Maria Theresa in the ocean liner service. We have Railroad, but no James Watt. We have James Cook, but no Suez Canal. And then we also have 2 military action leaders with Catherine and Robespierre. We have no military action leader in H1. Genghis Khan, Nostradamus can help with the strength. We have Gutenberg, but no Leonardo. We have Eleanor as a nice transitional leader. Saladin as a very solid leader. There's also Michelangelo, maybe together with St. Peter's Basilica, or generally some strong wonders. We have St. Peter's Basilica, but no Forbidden City. We have both Silk Road and Universitas and both of the strength wonders with Himeji Castle and Great Wall. I'm playing in first position in this game, and I decided here to go for the Engineering Genius, which I think in this position is not a clear decision, because it could also be fine to just go for Aristotle. The thing is, probably the library will be taken away, Aristotle might be taken, and at the next turn I might have a chance of getting Cleopatra. However, using Cleopatra with every turn without delaying my economy in this position would be best possible if I actually go for the Colossus. But there's no Suez Canal in there as a synergy for the Colossus, and also it also only has 2 steps, so not that many opportunities to use Cleopatra's resources. And it didn't feel too great, but it could still be fine to go for Cleo. So I considered just going for Aristotle, having a solid leader, and then just at the next turn getting a wonder. And Morta Pêcheur at least could only take Hanging Gardens in the Engineering Genius, so he could take a wonder and the Engineering Genius, but maybe not the best wonder at least. So I think Aristotle could be fine here, but there are some interesting leaders that could be revealed. There's Hammurabi, Confucius, Hippocrates. All of those are interesting leaders, and I thought that maybe the Acropolis or at least the Hanging Gardens could still be there at my next turn, and it could also just be an option to plan on not going for a leader the next turn, instead just take Acropolis for example, build a mine, increase my population, and then I can use the engineering genius in the first step, meaning that while I delay my leader by a turn, at least I can still use all of my civil actions effectively and then maybe get a potentially better leader on the turn after, and then I have the engineering genius in first position. It's sometimes a bit tricky to make use out of the civil actions in the third turn anyway, so having to spend those civil actions to elect a leader relatively late is not too bad. And with that, I at the end went with the engineering genius with the plan of either going for Clio or, depending on what leaders are revealed, just delaying on going for a leader. Martin Bécher will now go for Aristotle. I think that's not a surprise. He takes him together with the cultural heritage. Danny Boy will then go for the library, also not a surprise. Martin, of course, also could have gone for the library, but Aristotle, I think, is also a very solid pick for him. Danny Boy now goes for the library and the frugality. And as you can see, there are some interesting leaders revealed. Hippocrates is coming down the row, Hammurabi is coming down the row. It is, of course, the case that Danny Boy hasn't a leader yet, so if I don't take Hammurabi for 3 here, and it could be considered maybe taking Hammurabi, electing him, just building a mine, skipping the HA wonder, waiting for those H1 wonders. I do think it could actually be a somewhat solid line, but it's still quite expensive, and at the end I decided to rather just take the Acropolis, with that also deny a wonder from Martin Bécher, which is maybe not that important. I think with Aristotle and also the Silk Road and Universitas being in there, it can actually turn out very fine for him, skipping the HA wonder. Nonetheless, there's always the chance that it could get a bit awkward for him, and so I took the Acropolis here, and then I could go for Clio, but at the next turn that's not really a nice way of building the mine and the first step of the Acropolis if I start by building a lab now. And with that I decided to just skip my leader, expecting that Danny Boy will go for Hammurabi and that I at the next turn can start going for Hippocrates, which is not too bad. I delay it a little bit until I collect the tokens, but depending on when the leaders will be available, it maybe does make really a difference anyway if I get him turn later or not. Of course, if there's an early Saladin, it could be annoying, but then it could still be fine just taking Saladin and maybe waiting a turn, electing him. And then I will just use all of my civil actions effectively by building a mine, increasing population, taking Acropolis and building a step with the engineering genius. I draw already a tactic, which is nice, also the knowledge of the ancients, which is a decent event to see it because Martin Bécher has no HA wonder available. He just goes for Aristotle, builds a mine, increases his population, and now that he can't really do anything else apart from taking a yellow card with his last civil action, he just plays the cultural heritage A. Then it's Danny Boy's turn. He is indeed willing to pay 2 civil actions for Hammurabi, which I think is a good decision, and then he just builds a mine, increases his population, not using frugality yet to maybe make it a bit more easily possible to get out of corruption at the next turn, or to even not have any corruption at all starting into the turn. I decided then to push knowledge of the ancients. I have the Acropolis, I have a little bit of additional strength. The knowledge of the ancients seems like a useful event. I will have some additional knowledge, so I just started with pushing here. And then I will go for Hippocrates this turn. I will elect him. I could now finish the Acropolis, but I decided to rather build a second lab. Now I have 1 civil action left. I could try to not go into consumption here, take one of those HA yellows, but with the Acropolis missing out on the free religion is maybe even worse than usual, because it will also cost you a discount when you go into a government form. And at the end I decided to, in this situation, go into consumption relatively early, use my civil actions effectively. There are some interesting cards coming down the row. A lot of those might be taken away by my opponents, but there's still a chance that I maybe could get Eleanor as an early replacement leader, maybe the monarchy, even though I expected that to be taken away by Danny Boy, who has Hammurabi. But still, there could be interesting cards, and I also felt that with those cards coming down the row, being ahead on civil actions and being able to have a lot of free civil actions at the next turn could be quite useful. I draw 2 cards here, a plunder and another tactic. Martin takes the theology. Thanks to scoring that science, he has now exactly enough to go for the code of laws this turn, and one reason why he has now enough to go for that Code of Laws that early already is also the one science of the cultural heritage. So that cultural heritage pick and playing that card does now already generate a bit of value for him with being able to go for the Code of Laws a bit quicker. He could have also gone for the alchemy, maybe it would have allowed him to invest into something, but with Aristotle it's just so strong having additional civil actions, so I think that looks like a good turn from him. Now it's Danny Boy's turn, he builds the second lab, he increases his population with the frugality, takes the alchemy, and here I kind of really expected him to take the monarchy for 2 civil actions, however he decides against it, instead takes 2 yellow cards. And of course, getting early monarchy with Hammurabi is very strong. However, missing out on those 2 yellow cards is also quite some value, and there is a chance that he actually gets another copy of monarchy at the next turn. Of course, it could be taken away by Martin Pêcheur, who has Aristotle, but there is a chance that he might get that copy, and with that, maybe he was fine not taking that one now, even though, of course, getting an early revolution with Hammurabi has quite some strong potential. Now it is my turn, I can't use my politics phase, and as you can see I decided here to go for the alchemy. In this turn, one of the main questions was, am I willing to take Eleanor here? Not with the plan of electing her already this turn, but maybe at the next turn after I have collected a second Hippocrates token. Because then I just get a leader. Eleanor can just be very fine, and I get value out of a leader as soon as I don't need Hippocrates any longer. And I could just do a turn like finishing Acropolis, taking the monarchy, taking alchemy, taking Eleanor, and the next turn electing Eleanor. The thing is, I have no event cards in hand for now. I mean, I will get the 3rd military action with the monarchy, so that could be fine. It was a very close call for me. At the end, I decided against taking Eleanor here, because if I don't go for Eleanor, then I actually have the option of, instead of finishing the Acropolis to get out of corruption, I can actually go for an alchemy upgrade. So doing that now gives me a science production a bit earlier. And I just need to hope that maybe one of the other leaders will be available relatively soon. I think it could have been a fine turn here taking Eleanor and delaying the alchemy upgrade, but it would cost me a science, and that at the end just was tipped me to the direction of going for the alchemy and not going for Eleanor. And with the Acropolis I of course want to have the monarchy here. I have a nice draw because I get the open borders agreement. There's no Columbus, however, in the game, so the vast territory maybe not as strong as it sometimes is. Drawing that one, Martin Pêcheur will just take some yellow cards, the engineering genius in the rich land. There's an Universitas coming down the row. If none of Danny Boy or I denies it, then he could have a chance of potentially just taking that and finishing it at the next turn, which could be quite strong. However, he isn't taking the monarchy, maybe he doesn't want to make it easy for Danny Boy to let the Universitas be discarded, and that was something that I was hoping for here, that Danny Boy would take the monarchy and then maybe the rich land. Both are useful cards, and then he can let the Universitas be discarded, making it that Marta doesn't get the option of taking and finishing the Universitas. Danny Boy sees the development of science is revealed, he goes for an alchemy upgrade, increases his population, takes the monarchy, and then sadly takes the irrigation. I was a bit unhappy to see it, because I really felt like denying that Universitas from Martin Pêcheur could really be quite strong and limit his options a little bit. But of course, I would get then maybe he would maybe then just get the chance to go for the Silk Road, and with that, maybe Danny Boy thought that it's not that important, and he maybe just prioritized what he wanted to have the most for himself. Nonetheless, the rich land is a useful card as well, and maybe it could have denied a strong option from Martin Pêcheur here, because at least he can't take and finish the Silk Road at the same turn. Now it's my turn. I offer the open borders agreement to Danny Boy. Of course, Danny Boy has Hammurabi, but he also has the monarchy, and likely will soon go for that monarchy, meaning we both will end up being in a position with being on monarchy and having 4 military actions, while for Martin Pêcheur at the moment it would make the difference between being on 2 or 3 military actions. Also, there's actually Saladin available for me for 2 civil actions, and I decided to just take him and elect him already this turn, getting the civil action going very early. I have only collected 2 Hippocrates tokens, but I still want to replace him. Also, there would be Isabella available for 1 civil action. Maybe I could even take her, go for the vast territory. I do think I considered that, but for now I don't have any iron production, so paying some resource could still be somewhat costly, and I also haven't drawn any colonization cards, and there's also no Suez Canal in there. At the end, I just rather wanted to have Saladin here. And so I will elect him. I will finish the Acropolis. Now I have just enough science to develop the monarchy, sadly not with the biggest discount, but still I can get it going this turn, increasing my amount of civil actions, and then I will take the urban growth, which can allow me to go for an alchemy upgrade. I considered denying the Universitas myself from Marta Pescher, but I don't think it's a good idea here because for me, I think maybe going for the Silk Road is more interesting, and I can't easily go for Saladin then. My turn would be a lot more awkward, and I was hoping that at least if Marta Pescher has now the option to go for Universitas, I might have the option to go for the Silk Road, unless Danny Boy decides to deny that Silk Road from me. And then this urban growth I might even be able to use with the Silk Road bonus potentially soon. I revealed the Legion tactic because I have a free military action anyway, and I thought revealing it to my opponents is not too bad. I draw now also the medieval army tactic. Marta Pescher seeds, the development of civil life is revealed. He will actually use it to build a 3rd farm, interestingly, but that 3rd farm will actually allow him to already at his next turn again increase his population. And then he still has just enough resources left to be able to take and finish the Universitas, going up to 4 science production, and then taking the swordsman, scoring another science with Aristotle, having a military technology available. So yeah, I think that is a very powerful turn for him. Now it's Danny Boy's turn. He will use the development of civil life to develop the monarchy. Finishes the library. I was now interested to see, will he deny the Silk Road here? He will go for the Knights. He could still go for the Silk Road with Hammurabi, but instead he decides to go for the Iron here. It's the first copy, and at the next turn he can maybe start going for some Iron upgrades. I do think the Silk Road could have been an interesting pick here. I think I prefer getting the Silk Road here over getting an Iron. And for Danny Boy, I do think the Silk Road could be fine, but I mean he has already some decent science production. There are some strong H2 wonders, so I do think it's understandable that he wants to go for the Iron here. And now it is my turn. I decided to not push. I don't want to potentially get hit by Dark Ages. Of course, my opponents might get hit by it quite heavily, but still, when I go for another alchemy upgrade, a Silk Road, I will be producing a lot of science. I already have a government form, and I just didn't feel comfortable seeding that into the deck. And then this turn I will indeed go for the Silk Road. I considered maybe the Great Wall to help me with the military, but I do think in this position, with already having 6 civil actions, maybe missing out on the second copy of Iron, being a low resource production, that is the situation that is ideal for the Silk Road, and with that I just took it. I built the first step, allowing me to already this turn use the urban growth with the Silk Road bonus, getting another lab upgrade in for free. And then I decided to take the irrigation. I might miss out on the iron, so it could at least be nice to have this irrigation in hand to be able to invest into something. Also, there's an ocean liner service in the game, which the irrigation pairs nicely together with. And then I also decided to go for the frugality here. I also considered taking only one or none of those cards, instead just building some steps of the Silk Road, having more civil actions at the next turn. But at the end I figured that both of those cards might just end up being very useful for me. The irrigation, just having that as an option in my hand, and the frugality with the Silk Road bonus will very likely just give me an additional population. That population might end up being unhappy, but if the development of settlement ends up being revealed, then again the additional population that I get thanks to the frugality will actually be a happy one, and so I think that's just a very effective way of making sure to have an additional population here. Also, taking another card makes it that the Great Wall will be discarded before Danny Boy's turn. Don't think it's necessary to take it away. He has the Knights, but still it could be an interesting option, depending on what tactic he plans to go for. Marta seeds, opens the development of religion. I think all players have a free population lying around and are able to take that. Marta takes the iron, scoring another science with Aristotle, upgrades one mine with the Ridgeline. At the next turn, he has just enough resource to go for 2 more upgrades, unless, of course, he goes for an upgrade to Swordsman now, which he will do, meaning he can only go for 1 more upgrade, but make sure to be stronger to maybe make it less likely that he will get hit by a strength event before his next turn. Also, what is nice for me, the remaining leaders are relatively late. There's still Nostradamus, Gutenberg, Genghis Khan will stay on 2 civil actions for Danny Boy, so my opponents maybe have to pay some civil actions or will maybe lose the HA leader to the end of the age because of those late leaders. But I mean, they also had a chance to maybe take some other leaders which they didn't use. Danny Boy will now start going for 1 iron upgrade, takes the bread and circuses and the reserves. Not really an ideal turn, I guess, but the reserves, the 2 resources, might allow him to go for 2 instead of only 1 upgrades at his next turn, so that might contribute to his economy, the bread and circuses. There's Pierre in the game, there's Gaudi in the game, so it could end up being a nice technology to have. Nonetheless, being able to upgrade that monarchy with the Code of Laws, which now I will be able to get, could also be quite relevant, so I'm not sure if maybe it could be better to take the Code of Laws here, but maybe Danny Boy also plans on going for the Knight soon, and then it would actually take quite a while until he can go for the Code of Laws, and using the last civil action maybe also wouldn't be that easy, so at the end he decided here to go for the reserves, but I was somewhat happy to see it because I can now go for the Code of Laws. I will actually push it my turn, and I did consider now pushing the Dark Ages because I know now that I will get the Code of Laws and I will actually develop it this turn. Maybe I should do it. My opponents could lose quite a bit of science, but Danny Boy might invest to science. If the event is revealed immediately, he actually doesn't lose any science. And so at the end I decided against seeding it because I will finish the Silk Road now this turn, and then if the Dark Ages remain in the deck for a little while, then again it could also be awkward because I might just be producing a lot of science. And at the end I rather seeded the Crusades, which is also not a completely safe event, but I thought there are some chances that I might just end up being the strongest without too much effort, and then maybe it can give me a little bit of a culture swing. Hopefully at least I won't be the weakest. The development of warfare is revealed. I happily took that free warrior. And then I think this turn is relatively straightforward. I will go for the Code of Laws, getting even more civil actions, which gives me even more opportunities to maybe use some yellow cards with the Silk Road. I developed the Code of Laws. I will just finish the Silk Road, getting out of corruption, getting the production going, having those civil actions out of the way, maybe being prepared to take an H2 wonder early in case a strong one is revealed, and then I will just use the frugality with the Silk Road bonus, meaning that I have a population and I still have enough food to get another population going at my next turn. Then I will draw some cards, another medieval army tactic, meaning there aren't really that many knights tactic available for my opponents. Mortado's turn will go for Genghis Khan. The other leaders are very late, so paying that many additional civil actions to maybe get Nostradamus is probably not worthwhile, so he will just be going for Genghis Khan here. Elects him, will get 3 additional culture this turn, goes for a mine upgrade, and interestingly will now go for theology to get out of corruption. He could have also increased his population. The thing is, if he doesn't, then he produces an additional food, which now will actually allow him to increase his population 2 times at the next turn. And maybe if he has a heavy cavalry tactic, that could make the difference between going for that heavy cavalry tactic 1 turn earlier. So I think that makes sense here. Maybe there could of course also be something like immigration in the deck, and that could also be a hint towards such an event. Now it's Danny Boy's turn. He will go for Nostradamus, elects him, takes the swordsman, and then actually increases his population, which is interesting. Could be a hint towards reds, because he could have also gone for another upgrade. Maybe he's just afraid that reds were pushed by one of us, but I mean, we both have some food saved up, so it rather looks like maybe there's a chance that Danny Boy could have seeded reds. Or maybe the pestilence is coming. That's of course another event where increasing his population makes a lot of sense here. He then plays the fighting band tactic, increasing his strength by a bit, meaning at my turn when I see them actually the strongest. Also, as you can see, a strategy is available here, and that at the end made me willing to push the border conflict here, seeding now while I'm the strongest, and hopefully also having some chances to win that border conflict with the help of the strategy. I see it, and I get lucky here. The Crusades are revealed immediately, meaning I get that culture swing without too much effort, so I was quite happy that seeding that event worked out nicely for me. Then this turn I will definitely grab the strategy. I should have easily enough science to invest into it. It will help me a lot with the strength. And I thought for a moment about taking the selective breeding here, but I think it's just too expensive, especially with having the irrigation as a backup and with the ocean liner being in the game. And I think it's a lot better to just now take all the yellows that I can get. I will certainly take Breakthrough in Ridgeland. The Ridgeland is especially useful for those coal upgrades that I probably want to go for at some point, but then I also just have enough civil actions to also take patriotism reserves. Of course, I have to be a bit careful with my hand space, but I can just develop strategy with the breakthrough, and I can have a lot of hand space. And now I hopefully will be able to use a yellow card every turn, making some very nice use out of the Silk Road that I'm having. Also, I will then build an additional warrior. Thanks to the rich land, I still have enough resources to go for a coal upgrade in case the coal should be on the row at the next turn, and it also just makes sure that I remain the strongest for now. Generally, I was quite happy about my position. Now it will depend, of course, a little bit on the timing of coal, but if I get coal, maybe in a strong H2 wonder, I think my position could be looking quite strong, also with having the strategy now. Culture-wise, the players are somewhat similar, but also in that regard, I'm starting to get at least a small lead here. Martar this turn takes the breakthrough, takes the selective breeding. There's even another copy of the selective breeding already in the row. Then he increases his population once and builds a swordsman. Doesn't take the Republic or Conmon here, but with him knowing that both I and Danny Boy have the monarchy already, maybe he thinks that he should have a good shot at getting the monarchy for cheaper at the next turn and then being able to develop it actually with the breakthrough, which could allow him to, for example, go for Conmon and selective breeding at the next turn. He then reveals the phalanx tactic already, but for now hasn't fulfilled it yet. Still gets the 3 culture from Genghis Khan because Danny Boy is only at 3 strength. Danny Boy seeds and opens the foray. I was very happy to see that. The resources and food that I can get from that are extremely helpful for me with being on bronze mines and HA farms, and so I just was very happy being able to win that event. Danny Boy takes the second copy of selective breeding, meaning I either have to just work on irrigations or maybe get the ocean liner service. Danny Boy will go for 1 food upgrade, could have gone for a second one, which would have allowed him to increase his population at the next turn, but he rather decides to get some resource upgrade in before that. Now it is my turn. I'm again the strongest, so I could see it. However, this time it's not that easy if I want to see it. I'm not that nicely prepared for colonies. I have some colonization cards. I can maybe develop the strategy, get even more colonization cards, but Danny Boy will know about those colonies. And here I at the end decided against seeding, and I have a spare military action at the end of my turn, so I thought it's maybe fine just using the spy against Martin Pêcheur. He had only 2 cards in hand, so there could have been a chance that he would have to discard both in order to prevent the aggression, and if he maybe has drawn an H2 tactic or some other strong H2 card already, it could have turned out to be a very ugly aggression for him. Then this turn there's no early coal in the row, and I have to invest my civil action somehow, and I decided to take the railroad here. Of course, it's always a small gamble, but the chance that both coals will be denied by my opponents is just very low, and so I think in a position where you can easily go into coal at some point, it can be fine to already take the railroad, because it will just be at some point a very strong wonder. I don't really plan on finishing that in the next turns, rather just go maybe for coal first ideally, and then maybe finish it at the end of H2, beginning of H3, and I think at that point it will just give me a huge boost, and I will have the benefit of already having taken that wonder, meaning I might not be overloaded by civil actions later on and can just use some civil actions nicely this turn. I could now even build some steps to get out of corruption, but now that I know that I won't get a copy of selective breeding, and now that I have blocked my wonder slot, I thought it might be best to just get some farm upgrades going as quickly as possible. I will use the breakthrough with the Silk Road bonus, go for 2 upgrades that gets me out of corruption, and I can increase my population immediately the next turn, and with me having missed out on those other food techs, I think just getting the food production going now as quickly as possible could be interesting. And I also thought if maybe the next turn there is no coal available yet, it could actually be an interesting option to increase my population and use the rich land with the Silk Road bonus maybe to build a 3rd farm and then have my population income nicely covered. I keep the rebellion and the historic territory too. I actually draw 2 tactics, which I was happy to see, because both of them could be usable depending on what military technologies I will be able to get. Now it's Martin Pêcheur's turn. There is actually an ocean liner service revealed. He will go for the Conmon, that gives him a nice boost to his civil actions, and then he just takes the ocean liner, increases his population, builds a swordsman, gets out of corruption like this, fulfills the phalanx tactic now with Genghis Khan, is the strongest, gets the culture again from Genghis Khan, and then the next turn he has enough resources to finish the ocean liner. Danny Boy seeds, the knowledge of the ancients is revealed now. Having taken the railroad will now also give me 1 additional resource from that event, so I get the most out of that. Danny Boy has skipped the Code of Laws earlier, but now has a chance of getting this Justice System and also has the additional blue tokens available now. We'll go for an additional lab upgrade first, and for a mine upgrade, delays the food upgrades for now, but thanks to having done one already at the turn before, he has now at the next turn exactly enough food to get one more population going, so I think that plan plays out quite nicely now for him. He has now one civil action left. It could be interesting to see whether he's willing to take the rifleman or rather wants to have something like reserves. And he takes the reserves here, has already swordsman, maybe has already also a tactic where he doesn't need any infantry techs. Otherwise, I think it could be worthwhile going for the rifleman because it's certainly a technology that I was now very happy to get. It's my turn, and I again decided against sieging because I didn't want to put one of those colonies in and also not the rebellion. Then I will certainly take the rifleman with having drawn the defensive army tactic. There's still no coal in the row, so I have to wait with my resource upgrades. I will take a copy of Richland with the Silk Road bonus that will be extremely valuable. I will increase my population. I will build a step of the railroad that gets me out of corruption, and then I will develop the strategy, taking the revolutionary idea, another card for the Silk Road. It certainly could be considered to take the frugality here instead of the revolutionary idea, or maybe even together with it, even though taking it together with it would be a bit awkward because then I would have a full hand, and if there's coal for 3 it could just be in the best to go for coal, but having a full hand could be a bit awkward then. And so I thought about the frugality here, but I at some point might still want to go into an H3 government form. I will go for rifleman, I will go for coal. I still thought the revolutionary idea and the additional science could just still end up being very useful for me later on. And with that I decided to go for revolutionary idea. And then, as I already said at a turn before, I think it's a very interesting idea here to build a third farm using the rich land with the Silk Road bonus. So far I think I've been nicely able to use that bonus quite often. And now I am just at 0+4 food production, meaning at the next turns I will just be able to increase my population every turn, and my food production hopefully will be somewhat nicely covered now. And for the next turn I was hoping that maybe now one of the copies of coal will be available, so that I can start upgrading my resource production. With developing the strategy I made sure to not be the weakest after my turn. I draw some events. Martapesher Seeds, the immigration has been revealed, so that might have indeed been also one of the reasons why he was willing to go for that theology upgrade earlier on. And in this turn he, in addition to the population from the immigration, will also finish the ocean liner service, so he is now getting a nice amount of population going. He then reveals the conquistadors tactic, which will give him for now even more strength with Genghis Khan, takes the efficient upgrade and the frugality. Could have also gone for an iron upgrade, but maybe with this amount of civil actions is fine of delaying that in order to maybe be able to go for that upgrade with the efficient upgrade. Now it's Danny Boy's turn. He seeds and opens the pestilence, so him increasing his population early on was then maybe a sign of the pestilence. He loses a population now, will upgrade his second farm, so has his economy upgraded. Nonetheless, his economy is looking somewhat mediocre. I mean, he has everything covered, but he also has nothing extraordinary. It's just everything is fine, but culture-wise he isn't pulling ahead, so at the moment it feels like it could just be something missing to pull him ahead compared to me and Martin. He has everything covered, but yeah, we will have to see if that production will end up being strong enough for him. He develops the bread and circuses, builds one. There is no rebellion coming, but maybe just he also needs a bit of strength potentially, and then he takes some yellow cards. Now it is my turn. I am again not the strongest, but I will actually get a bit stronger this turn, and I know that the border conflict is one of those H1 events, which is why I didn't want to push and instead wanted to try getting stronger, and I used then my politics phase to cancel that open borders agreement, as I don't really need the military action that much, and for Danny Boy it could have at least been useful for one more turn, and so I decided to cancel that here. Then, as you can see, I will actually go for Anthony Gaudi this turn. Of course, it's a question, what leader do I want to go for this turn? I don't really need Robespierre. James Cook isn't really doing that much. Then both Anthony Gaudi and Newton could be considered. If I don't take Newton this turn, I think it's likely that he will be taken away, and then there's only Shakespeare left, so I kind of have to go for a leader this turn. I thought about grabbing Newton for 3, but here I think hopefully when I will get coal, I will transition into a strong economical position, and then just having a culture leader and having an easy way to transform that into culture could be interesting. Also, I will actually grab the team sports this turn because I will still need a happy face solution, and the copy of organized religion that you can see in the row is the last one, meaning if I don't take a happy face solution now, it will be discarded. And with going for Antoni Gaudi, I was then willing to pay an additional civil action for the team sports, which works then nicely with Gaudi and also prepares me for Pierre. And so I took Antoni Gaudi, however I don't elect him yet. Instead, keeping the additional civil action from Saladin, I will take the team sports, increase my population, develop the rifleman, play the patriotism with the Silk Road bonus this turn, and then I will go for 2 upgrades, making me the strongest, being prepared for hopefully winning the border conflict. Martin Pêcheur can't very easily overtake me in strength again, so I was hoping that that will allow me to win the border conflict, and then at the next turn, hopefully it will finally be the time that I can go into coal. And then maybe in 2 turns, go for team sports, maybe finish the railroad, depending on how the turns play out. Martin Pêcheur doesn't see it, so sadly not a chance yet to reveal the border conflict. He offers the international trade agreement to Danny Boy. He wants to have additional resource, while Danny Boy gets additional food. He is actually willing to take the architecture here for 3 civil actions, which is interesting. Of course, it's a strong technology. Maybe he potentially plans on going for the Harvard College at the next turn. He also hasn't really upgraded a lot of urban buildings yet, so it has a lot of potential. Maybe he didn't have that much else to do with the civil actions. Still maybe somewhat expensive, but at least if he is going for Newton now, he can actually develop it for free. And maybe at the next turn, there's a chance that he will get the last copy of journalism. Then he could maybe with Newton develop architecture and journalism for free and get a big science boost going. Also, he will actually build already a theology this turn. He could have elected Newton, developed architecture for free and built one. I'm not sure, so if maybe then he would have had corruption, and also he would lose the strength and culture from Genghis Khan, which he is now willing to keep for another turn. Then he buys seeds, and I was very happy to see that the border conflict is actually on top. Those 3 resources are extremely helpful for me, so I was happy to win that event. For Danny Boy, it's a bit annoying. He doesn't have anything very cheap left, so having to destroy a religion is somewhat awkward, but now at least he can make a transition into bread and circuses, which gives him quite a big potential for Pierre, and also that population is still free and happy, so he can now just transition into some more military, plays the wave of nationalism and builds 2 cannons. Doesn't reveal a tactic for now. It is looking like he could have the fortifications tactic, but maybe he also doesn't want to reveal it yet potentially. At my turn, I see the politics of strength into the deck. I'm still the strongest, so there could be another strength event coming. And also with getting the strength of the railroad soon, and with having the defensive army tactic, and also with planning on taking the 2nd copy of cannons for 3 this turn, I was confident enough in pushing that event, because I can just go for some culture production with Antoni Gaudi, but if I get some nice draws out of the politics of strength, there's certainly the possibility to also go for a big strength push. And I actually also have already drawn some H2 wars, so I was thinking that going into a bit more of a military heavy direction could also end up being interesting. However, one thing that you maybe also noticed, sadly the copies of coal are still in the deck, so that is a bit awkward for me. But hopefully at the next turn I will finally be able to get them. There's an event revealed, the Historic Territory 1. I wasn't willing to bid that much for it. I don't want to rebuild a rifleman here. I need a lot of resource to finish railroad, get the coal, and I want to get that going as quickly as possible. So I wasn't willing to bid more than a warrior, and at the end Martin Pêcheur is able to win it for a swordsman and a colonization card. This turn I first of all play the reserves with the Silk Road bonus for 3 resources. I then can finish the railroad. I will switch to Antoni Gaudi. I'm at 18 strength, which is nice. And then as said, I will just pay 3 civil actions for the cannons, because even though the coals have been laid, I still think I have a solid position. I can transition into some culture reduction with Antoni Gaudi, and then just making sure that I have the cannons and can go for the defensive army tactic. Also making it that I'm prepared for some H3 tactics. I think it's just very important, even though it is also somewhat costly, because I could have gone for the opera now, but the thing is, I At the next turn, probably first want to go for coal anyway. I need to go for the team spots maybe soon. And at the time when I'm then ready to go for new urban buildings, there should be a solid chance that either multimedia or movies might be available. So I at this point was willing to just secure myself that copy of cannons. And at the next turn, I was hoping that I might have a shot at getting into coal mines. I discard my H1 colonization cards and I draw an H2 colonization card, also a third war actually. Marta seeds and opens the Ravages of Time. He will lose the Universitas, so that's a bit annoying for him, and I will lose the Acropolis, which is also a bit annoying because I might go for some urban buildings and I could have still had a nice discount on a potential H3 government form. So maybe for Danny Boyd could end up being the best event, and he probably was also the one who seeded it. Marta Bashir elects Newton this turn, so Genghis Khan will retire. He's very low in strength now, and he will then take the cavalryman for 3. I have taken away the cannons. He takes the journalisms, the navigation is actually developing that navigation, takes the reserves, and then builds 2 cavalrymen, putting him at 17 strength, being the second strongest. And at the next turn, he can then maybe start with going for journalisms to get some strong Newton science production going. And he actually has the classic army tactics, so now he is even the strongest. Now H3 starts. Danny Boy offers a promise of military protection pact to Marta Peshur, is willing to sacrifice a culture reduction to get a bit of additional strength going, interestingly. He will increase his population, builds an arena, takes the computers, interestingly, for 3, but that card could help him a lot of actually making it that his civilization maybe has a bit more power, because his economy is set with being on 6 civil actions and the production that he's having, that's just fine, and he might really need Pierre to not fall behind, but with the computers he's prepared for all of those lab leaders, and if he gets a Bill Gates, for example, at the next turn, that could still be quite strong. And also he has missed out on an H2 leader, he won't take Shakespeare, meaning that it's even more important to be prepared for as many leaders as possible. So he takes the computers and also the urban growth to go for some cheap upgrades. And then interestingly, he reveals the fortifications tactic, meaning thanks to the strength of the promise of military protection pact, he's now not the weakest any longer, and he had Nostradamus, so that could be a sign of there being some strength events. On the other hand, he didn't reveal the tactic at the turn before. He had only 1 draw. There's maybe the chance that he drew the tactic just with that 1 draw, but with him being willing to go for those 2 cannons, it would have been quite a lucky outcome. So I rather expected that he had that, and then it was a bit weird maybe that he didn't want to reveal it already the turn before, if there are some strength events in there, unless maybe he wanted to keep it the fighting band for the colonization potentially of the historic territory 1, but now he has the tactic, and now I'm actually the weakest. Also, at the end of Danny Boy's turn, we are at the beginning of H3, so we can maybe take a look at the overview very quickly about Danny Boy's position. I already talked a little bit. I think he potentially has the weakest position here. He has everything covered, but isn't extraordinarily good in anything. However, if he gets a good leader soon, either Pierre or one of those lab leaders together with computers, he still has quite some potential. So, yeah, he definitely is completely in the game. But if he is a bit unlucky with the leaders, then it could end up being a bit tricky for him. But of course, Pierre always can bring you back in games. Marta Peshur is for the moment the strongest, will get some nice population income, also with the frugality in the reserves potentially, and he will soon be able, or the reserves he probably will use for resource at the next turn to get a journalism's build, to get the science boost with Newton. He also has the culture lead for now, so I think he has a potentially strong position. But I still was also happy about my position. I still need to fix some things, so there are coals coming down the road that I will now be able to upgrade to. I will have some strong resource production. I still have a lot of science saved up. I might be able to get into an H3 government form, even though I will now lose the Acropolis. And then I still need to go for team spots. I still need to do some stuff, but with Anthony Gaudi I also have a relatively clear plan on how I want to maybe continue or want to set up some culture reduction. So overall I was somewhat happy about my position, but nonetheless the other players are still completely in the running, and Marta Peshur, even as a culture lead, will get Newton online with the journalisms at the next turn, and then he is still might have an even better position. Now it is my turn, and there is a card revealed, which yeah, now makes up, or maybe more than makes up, for me having to wait for those coals so long. It was a bit annoying for me with the late coals, but now with not having invested into them yet, I can actually go for an early oil. I still considered also, for example, going into democracy, which will also give me a nice boost, but at the end I just thought the oil with the railroad is just too big of a boost, and I was hoping that maybe there could be a chance that I could still get a copy of democracy the next turn, even though Danny Boy with having monarchy might take that first copy. So I will get into coal thanks to having that rich land that I can use with the Silk Road bonus. I will be able to go for an upgrade. It's just enough to get me out of corruption and to not have an uprising. I then, with my last civil action, have to increase my population. Shout outs to Hippocrates here, because without his token I now would have had an uprising issue, meaning I either would have to delete something or I would not be able to go for the turn. So the Hippocrates token being extremely viable at that point. And yeah, now I of course was happy about my position. 12 resource production is quite strong. Nonetheless, for the moment I have 2 unhappy workers. I am the weakest, so I could get hit by some different events, meaning at the next turn I will maybe then be able to go for team sports, maybe build a cannon, reveal the tactic, then I maybe will have completely stabilized. I was hoping that I won't get hit by anything bad before that, and that afterwards I might be in a position to run away potentially with my big production now. And also there's actually Marie Curie coming down the road. In case she isn't taken away, she could also be a nice replacement for Antoni Gaudi. I will draw some cards. Impact of variety and competition could be seedable impacts. Also I have an early war over culture, which is interesting. Mortar seeds and opens the iconoclasm actually, so that's quite an impactful event, probably seeded by Danny Boy, who didn't bother taking any H2 leader, and now actually all of the players have no leader available, and that actually makes it that Martin Pêcheur, who will still go for the journalisms, will now, after using the frugality to get out of corruption, he will actually take and elect Marie Curie. And I mean, it's really not the greatest Marie Curie. She is only giving him 1 culture and 1 science production, but he still values getting her early over potentially having to wait for other leaders for a while. And also he doesn't have any upgraded labs, meaning many of those lab leaders don't really work nicely for him. Pierre doesn't work nicely for him. So he might just now grab what he can get. But for him, I think it's a big setback here that he can't keep Newton and now has to go for a very mediocre Marie Curie. Maybe also wanted to make sure that she is taken away from me, because I of course would have been very happy to now, after having lost Gaudi, go for Marie Curie now. And Danny Boy maybe also as well, even though he also doesn't have the best Marie Curie setup, but I mean he has the computer, so he might also have gone for her. So I think there might also be some hate drafting reasons involved in Martin Pêcheur's reasoning. Danny Boy seeds, and sadly there is the immigration off opened, so I get punished here a bit. Also losing Antoni Gaudi maybe not being ideal for me, but at least I didn't get hit by any bad strength event. Danny Boy this turn will go for the computers, can go for 2 upgrades, has now some very solid science production, and then he will end up increasing his population, building another cannon, making sure that he is the strongest, and he has of course seen that I have put the politics of strength in there with Nostradamus, so he is preparing for that, and then he is willing to take the democracy, which of course I was unhappy to see, but with me being able to go for it, I think it also makes a lot of sense to take it for Danny Boy, who soon has enough science accumulated to go for it himself. Then it's my turn. I'm still the weakest. There's the politics of strength in there, so I don't want to push. And I thought a little bit about my turn and thought that maybe I want to go for team sports, maybe a cannon. And then I realized that with me maybe not wanting to push anyway, I can maybe use my politics phase in a different way, and there could actually be a chance of declaring a war here, because Martin Pêcheur doesn't have enough science to get any new military tech or military theory or anything going, has not enough resources to, for example, build 2 cavalrymen, which would let him copy the conquistadors tactic. So here I actually decided to go for a war over territory against him. And I don't have enough military actions to really make the war over culture work, so I will go for that war over territory, hoping to get at least 1 additional yellow token. It is still somewhat costly because I will miss out my draws, but I will force the actions of Martin Pêcheur, and most of the stuff that I will do this turn I would have done anyway, so I don't really do some awkward investments, but hopefully Marta will have to do them and will lose a yellow token to me, which at the end was value enough for me to sacrifice my draws here. So I declared at war, I will increase my population, I developed the team sports, build one, develop the cannons, build one, reveal the tactic, go for an upgrade, and then I take the urban growth and play the revolutionary idea with the Silk Road bonus. So I'm at 28 strength now. There is a chance that Marta Pescher could get help from an event, but I was willing to take that risk here because I thought more likely than not I will just deal a yellow token here and he has to do some awkward investments into the military. As my last civil action, I then, or as my last two, I take the urban growth, play the revolutionary idea here. I could have increased my population instead. Of course, revolutionary idea playing, that makes sense. I can this turn use the Silk Road bonus, and I also accumulate one more food with not going into consumption any deeper. But increasing my population already could have the advantage of having spent a civil action already, because in my position with my strong resource production, if there's something like multimedia or maybe that copy of movies on the road the next turn, it could be very interesting to just take that and build one. And there might be other important cards to take, for example air forces, and it could just be important having spent a civil action already. Nonetheless, at the end I went with the additional food production that I get and with the ability of playing the revolutionary idea already this turn with the Silk Road bonus. At the next turn, when I hopefully will steal one yellow token, I also then have just enough food to increase my population 2 times. With that, I think that just works out nicely, but I could potentially regret it if I maybe just need the one civil action at the next turn, and it could prevent me potentially from going for a strong turn. So I declared at war. Marta Pescher has to react now, and I was interested to see how he will react. And he will just go for 2 swordsmen, getting him out of corruption, just making sure that he doesn't lose 2 yellow tokens, taking the patriotism, another patriotism, the professional sports actually, and then also the engineering, so just takes a bunch of cards. Not an ideal turn for him, nonetheless. He is running a little bit away with the culture at the moment. Danny Boy takes Pierre, something I was not happy to see, especially that he is actually able to take him for 2 civil actions here. I do think Pierre helps him a lot. The moment Danny Boy is behind in culture, but soon that might change, and Pierre also could have been an interesting leader for me. At least maybe at my turn I could have a shot at getting Einstein now. Danny Boy can then elect Pierre, increases his population, builds another cannon, is willing to disband a warrior, takes the cannons, takes the modern infantry, maybe wants to be prepared for some tactics. It's interesting that he's willing to take both of those cards, because he could have also taken an endowment, which likely would have scored him 6 culture without any effort at some point. Maybe he wants to deny those cards. I'm not sure. Maybe he just wants to be prepared for as many tactics as possible, was maybe a little bit afraid from the military. Nonetheless, maybe he could also just say, let's only take one and take the endowment, and then just hope that I'm either get a fitting tactic, that the game doesn't get military heavy enough, or that threatening a tactic might be enough to then have the endowment. But of course it could also turn out very crucial for him having access potentially to a tactic. Now it is my turn. I am now not the weakest any longer. I have some potentially interesting impacts, and I started with seeding impact of competition here because I have some strong resource production, and I was thinking that I should have good ways of building up towards that impact nicely. First of all, I will steal a yellow token from Marta Pescher. I'm not the strongest at the moment, meaning I could miss out on the politics of strength, but nonetheless I wanted to start getting some impacts in there. Sadly, the politics of strength is indeed the card that is revealed, meaning Danny Boy gets some additional draws. At least I don't get hit by it, but of course I really would have liked to maybe see some impacts, which I could then prepare for. I this turn decided to go for Einstein. At the moment it's also not the ideal leader, but he has a lot of potential as soon as I maybe get multimedia or the second copy of computers. And also already this turn he will start producing me a bit of science and soon some culture. I get him for 1 civil action, and the other leaders are maybe also not that much better for me. So I think it makes a lot of sense to go for Einstein here. I elect him. I will take the democracy in hand. At the next turn I will have enough science accumulated to develop that. It could be that if a multimedia will be available, that I will rather go for the multimedia first before I will go for the democracy, but just having that in hand for later and as an option for the next turn I think is very, very strong. I will then increase my population, and as you can see I will actually again use the Silk Road bonus. I think I have now a very nice streak ongoing with using the Silk Road bonus every turn. And I just wanted to get more science production. It didn't feel completely great building that lab because I felt like going into multimedia might be the most interesting thing for me. Nonetheless, with Einstein I thought getting as many science production as quickly as possible could be strong. I don't know whether I will have access to the multimedia at the next turn or not. And yeah, just then at the end felt still like a good move. I have some decent population income. I have 2 bronze mines lying around that I can disband at some point. So I was hoping that it will be fine for me to go for multimedias, even with having done that investment now into alchemies. Then I have 1 civil action left, and I decided here to just increase my population. I certainly could have decided to go for the tanks here, making myself more flexible for tactics, threatening something like modern army. And that could certainly end up being relevant. Nonetheless, Danny Boy doesn't have that many resources. Martha Boucher needs air forces to maybe be really threatening. So I thought that maybe I don't need it that much, and just either hoping to get air forces or maybe threatening positional army or entrenchments could be enough to make myself safe for the rest of the game. And then I rather wanted to already have the civil action out of the way, so that at the next turn when I might get multimedia, I then can take it, develop it, build one, and get a big boost for Einstein and in my culture production. I build another cannon to now be the strongest again, and I get some draws, which I of course was happy or interested to see what I will be drawing, which impacts I might be able to prepare myself for. For now I draw the impact of colonies, which is not ideal, but maybe a seedable impact. At least I get some colonization cards together with it, meaning that if there are some new colonies coming, I could have actually a shot at winning those. Mortar this turn uses the ocean liner to get a new population going, takes the modern infantry, develops it, takes the military theory, plays the patriotism, goes for some upgrades, gets out of corruption, is now the strongest, takes the military build-up and just makes sure to have a lot of resources available for the military. Now it's Danny Boy's turn. He seeds and the popularization of science is revealed, which gives him the most and Mortar the least culture. He can go for the democracy this turn, builds another bread and circuses, and he's able to take the spaceflight here. So now with getting Pierre on the spaceflight, he declared the Olympic Games. I think he's completely back in the running, because now only the Manhattan Project and the United Nations are left as wonders, and those are maybe not as great as the spaceflight. So Danny Boy doesn't have the most resource saved up, but is in a position where I thought he might just be running away, and that of course, having the tournament standings in mind, are not some developments that I was happy to see, as it could mean that my hopes of not getting relegated could get crushed here. He takes the spaceflight, the engineering genius in the reserve, so just loads up on yellow cards. At least, as you can see, there will be a copy of multimedia available for me. At my turn, I also again did the decision of pushing this time the impact of variety. And I was very, very happy to see that Cold War here, which luckily, thanks to building that cannon at the turn before, I am able to win. And that Cold War is extremely strong for me this turn, because it allows me to go for both democracy and multimedia. Because before that Cold War was revealed, it was a really tough choice for me. Do I go for democracy? Do I go for multimedia? Now I can just go for both. Nonetheless, it still was not completely clear whether I should go for multimedia this turn, because the last 2 wonders are on the row, and I thought about taking the United Nations here, denying that wonder from Martha Pêcheur, and just making sure that I have a wonder available for certain myself. And I did a lot of calculations, and I don't remember those calculations now because the game is already a while ago. But at the end, I came to the conclusion that also with preparing for some impacts, and just maximizing the culture output, maximizing the amount of technologies that I can develop, I get a fine amount of culture. I might still need maybe a nice impact draw, but the United Nations, in order to justify not going for them, but I thought, while it certainly could be possible for Martha Pêcheur to take the United Nations, it's also certainly possible that he has other plans, maybe wants to prepare for some impacts himself, or wants to do some other stuff. And with that, Yeah, I decided to not take the United Nations. There could be a chance that I get it at the next turn, and even if not, I was hoping that that play of going for multimedia and getting a big boost this turn could still turn out to be somewhat similar in value. However, that play is also a bit more risky depending also on how I play it, and I decided to go for a bit more of a greedy line. Also, I have to have in mind that it's certainly possible that a game could end before my next turn, so it's one of those awkward situations that you oftentimes find yourself in when playing in first position, that you have to plan for both outcomes, for the game ending and the game not ending, which sometimes can be tricky. And I went for the multimedia here. I destroy a bronze mine, which seems like the logical thing to destroy. Nonetheless, the one resource that I'm losing has actually an impact, which is why I considered destroying an alchemy as well. But that again also destroys some things that I could do. So I will destroy this bronze mine. However, destroying that is certainly somewhat greedy, as we maybe will be able to see at the end of my turn. I will build a multimedia, and then I take the rockets and the professional sports, making sure that can develop two technologies at my next turn, and actually both of those technologies I can also use, because I can upgrade cannons to rockets and the team sports to professional sports, and with that get some points for the impact of competition. And generally, I mainly for the next turn thought that it could mainly be focused around preparing for the impact of competition, unless the United Nations will be around for me, but I thought that will be unlikely, while it's possible that Mortar might not take it. He likely will take a copy of reserves, and then the United Nations will be discarded before my next turn. I am playing it somewhat risky though here, because I'm with destroying this mine. I have now 18 resources available at the next turn. And to feel relatively safe from any wars, I just would need one resource more, because then I would have 19, which is enough to build another rifleman and two air forces. Both air forces are still in the deck, and I was mainly afraid that Mortar could maybe do something. He has the military theory, the patriotism, could go for another classic army tactic. He is not that threatening, but still he could do some stuff. And I might play it a bit too greedy now, but I also was very afraid of Danny Boy's setup here. He is very equal now with me in culture, and he gets a big wonder. So far, I haven't had the best impact draws, so at this point I was also worried that if I don't play it greedily, my opponents might just outculture me, and so I was willing to take that risk. I am still threatening some tactics. I can go for rockets, I still can threaten something like positional army and air forces, and I was hoping that Danny Boy could maybe also be a potentially interesting target for Martin Pecheur if he plans on going for war. Also, the Olympic Games are ongoing, so I was just hoping that either Martin Pecheur doesn't go for a war, or if he goes for one, that he takes Danny Boy as target, because I'm not completely safe here. And I could have destroyed a lab, but then I don't have enough science to develop two technologies at the next turn. I could have taken a reserves instead of one of those technologies. I could have done some stuff without too much effort to make myself a bit safer. But here I decided to go with the more greedy route, hoping that the Olympic Games will push Martin Pecheur away from going for a war that maybe doesn't end up being very big. Also, I was really hoping towards some impact draws. Sadly for now, just not a defense card, a war and an aggression. And there is actually a war happening. Martin Pecheur is going for a war, but I was very, very happy to see that I don't get punished for my greediness. And one important thing to have in mind, which is easily forgotten, is that Danny Boy and Martin Pecheur had the promise of military protection pact, because just a few moments ago Danny Boy was at 30 strength, but now the pact will be cancelled, and that makes Danny Boy a bit more vulnerable, which maybe justifies my greedy turn. And Martin Pecheur has maybe the biggest strength that he can potentially get, because he has the shock troops tactic available. Revealing that will now actually allow him to play the military build-up for 10 resources, then he develops the military theory, plays the patriotism, can destroy quite a bunch of stuff, and has just enough military actions and also enough resources to just build 4 cavalrymen, putting himself now actually at 64 strength, which is quite a lot and is definitely more than what I could have defended. So here I certainly can be a bit lucky and happy that I was not the target of the war. On the other hand, Danny Boy, I think, has a lower strength potential than I do. And with that, it also makes sense, I think, for Matapesher to go against him instead of going against me. Danny Boy has to react now. First of all, he sees the autonomous territory is revealed, which I was willing to bid, even though I still had to be a bit careful, thinking about what consequences bidding on that colony could have on me being able to defend against aggressions and defend against future wars. But I felt that sending one unit away and some colonization cards is fine, and so I wanted for a rifleman and 2 cards. I think I was willing to send 3 cards away in 1 unit or something like this, and I was happy winning that colony. However, I actually didn't take the culture here, which maybe could be fine, but at my next turn I want to build some units, and I don't necessarily want to start destroying some stuff. Maybe I should just destroy some stuff, but it could hurt for some impacts, and the resource could still turn out to be relevant if I destroy a bronze mine now, with me having a lot of ways how I can maybe prepare for different impacts. So here I just took the additional food, giving me more population, which also potentially might help for some impacts and might give me some culture there. Danny Boy plays the reserves for food, plays the auto reserves for resource, has now exactly 14 resource. He goes for the tanks. He made sure to have those 2 military techs available earlier, and now at least the tanks turn out to be very useful for him. He can build 2, has the mechanized army tactic, and that might potentially be the best defense that he could have done without having taken a very close look at it. But he's now at 46 strength and will lose a bunch of culture. So despite Olympic Games with Matapesher actually having the shock groups tactic, he now gets a significantly big war ongoing, and now things are not looking that great for Danny Boy, especially because with me having drawn that many defense cards, it's certainly possible that he could be in danger of getting hit by a war now. Now it's my turn. I have actually won a colony. With that, I was willing to push the impact of colonies into the deck, and there's actually another colony revealed. And again, I had to really consider if I'm willing to bid on that one. The science could actually be quite useful for me. More yellow tokens, 3 points for the impact of colonies, and so on. But here I figured that if I win that colony, I don't have a way to make sure that I'm safe from an aggression, and also I'm a bit more vulnerable. I mean, a follow-up war, Matapesher can't go for a lot more strength, so I think I was still somewhat safe from a follow-up war, but not from an aggression. I thought with that war, the dynamic of the game has shifted into a direction again that favors potentially me, but also potentially Mortar, who will now steal a significant amount of culture. And with that, I was not willing to take the risk of potentially getting hit by an aggression from Mortar. Instead, I just passed. Mortar is able to win that, and at least that costs him some points for the ongoing war. Also something that I considered. While he wins now the colony and gets some points for the impact of colonies, maybe also some benefits out of what the colony offers. At least he's losing some points against Danny Boy, which I thought at that point is relevant for me, at least for me winning the game. Of course, with having the tournament standings in mind, it could be even more important to just make sure to finish before Danny Boy. But also a victory makes it still easier for me in the last game, and to also finish before Takusto, and makes it that I have more results that work for me to avoid relegation. So this turn I take the air forces, I just build some military, making sure that I am not in danger of an aggression, which is somewhat costly because I don't go for the United Nations, but an aggression could be very swingy here, and again, instead of building that United Nations, the moment I don't have any impacts in hand, so I might draw one, but then I can just seed it, so I need to draw 2 good impacts in order to make use out of that, and I can also just prepare for some impacts. And so the difference in going for the United Nations was not, it would be best for me if I wouldn't be in danger, but it was not big enough for me to risk an aggression here. Instead, I just go for air forces, build 2 riflemen, build an air force. With being at 51 strength, I'm safe from an aggression. I will still get 3 draws going. I take the revolutionary idea and a military theory. I could have developed 2 techs already at the next turn without the revolutionary idea, but now I can maybe develop military theory plus one of those, or if there is this last copy of computers available for me, I could even potentially go for 3 technologies with Einstein. Now I was very much hoping that I at least get one good or at least seedable impact, because the impacts so far are somewhat fine, but I, without any good impact, could could have some troubles finishing before Matar here, and potentially also before Danny Boy, who might still be able to get the space flight going. And with that, I was very relieved to see that impact of science here. That is, of course, a very strong impact for me, as I should be able to keep the strongest science production here. Age 3 ends now. Marta Pêcheur will steal some culture. Let's see if he has another war on aggression. I think wars, maybe it could be possible against Danny Boy. But he couldn't go for a lot more strength, and as you can see, instead he pulls off a raid here. Again, a setback for Danny Boy, losing those buildings. Motai gaining some additional resources here. He will develop the engineering, builds an additional theology, makes sure to avoid famine here with building some farms, and then takes the revolutionary idea on the reserve, so he might just do some culture maximization. I don't know if that is a word, but he maximizes his amount of culture and maybe prepares for impacts here. Danny Boy, very graceful, despite some aggressive behavior from Marta Pêcheur. He still wants to shake his hand and have some peace, but Marta Pêcheur decides against that and rejects the peace treaty. Danny Boy, of course, would also get an additional cultures, and Marta may be still hoping to potentially pull an aggression off. Danny Boy rebuilds 2 arenas, goes up to 13 culture production, develops the oil, takes the revolutionary idea, the rockets, plays the reserves, develops the rockets, and at the next turn, if he doesn't get hit by a blunder, will be able to finish the space flight, and with that is not out of the game. He is behind, but he is the only player who will get a wonder, also has the biggest culture reduction for now. Now it is my turn, and I decided to see the impact of science into the deck. The impact of variety will be revealed, which gives me plus 18, Marta plus 16, and Danny Boy plus 12. So that is a solid impact for me, especially against Danny Boy. I take the computers, I can develop the rockets, the professional sports, and thanks to having played the revolutionary idea with the Silk Road bonus. I have said those words many times today, but thanks, the Silk Road bonus doesn't matter, but I have played it with the Silk Road bonus, and thanks to playing the revolutionary idea, I can go for an additional technology, score an additional 3 culture with Einstein, and then I just maximize the amount of points for my impact of competition. I could try to maybe overtake Danny Boy for the potential impact of culture here, but it's not that easy building another multimedia here. I would leave myself vulnerable for a lot of other impacts, so I think it's a lot better to just go for the save points with the impact of competition, which I can do by building a professional sports, going for an upgrade here, and going for an upgrade here, and then that's the end of my turn. Let's see if Marta has another aggression against Danny Boy, or if he will seed something. He will actually do nothing, has also only 1 card left, but no, it could have still maybe been an aggression or an impact. He goes for another technology and then builds a journalism, another journalism, and takes the air forces. He has to decide probably what impacts he wants to prepare for. He could have built some professional sports to prepare for impact of architecture, which he doesn't have knowledge of, and impact of competition, which is actually in the game. But he makes the call here, and it also will turn out to be the correct one, that he wants to prepare for the impact of science, which he now is stronger in than Danny Boy. And Danny Boy, if he wants to finish the space flight, can't overtake Marta in the science again. Danny Boy seeds and opens the impact of harmony, which is quite strong for Marta Pêcheur with plus 24, and also better for Danny Boy than for me. So my opponents, again, coming a bit closer. Danny Boy will play the reserves, will play the revolutionary idea, develops 1 more technology, disbands a warrior, builds a religion, and then he can finish the space flight for 27 points, so a very solid space flight that he managed to build despite getting hit by that war. And when we take a look at the culture before the final impacts, we can actually see that it's extremely close here. I have only a 5 culture lead before Danny Boy, only a 3 culture lead before Marta Pêcheur. At this point I was still somewhat confident, mainly to the impact of science draw. Without that I would be very worried now, but even with that impact of science, there are still impacts that could cost me the game here. And with that, no, I was hoping that it will be enough, but it's very close here, and let's take a look at how the game ends. First of all, there's the impact of colonies that I've seeded, which sadly is now actually better for Martin Pêcheur, who is now tying with me. There is the impact of competition, also one of my impacts, which gives me +4 against Martin Pêcheur and +4 against Danny Boy. Then another impact from me, the impact of science. Maybe those could now turn out to be the positions, with me as the leader getting the most points, Martin as the second place getting the second most points out of this impact, so the gaps are getting a bit bigger with that impact. Then we have the impact of agriculture, which is bad for Martin. Actually, Danny Boy is able to catch up some points again. And then we have the last impact, and it is the impact of culture. It's actually bad for me and best for Danny Boy, but it's just not enough to change anything here in the standings. Danny Boy being able to come very close towards Martin Pêcheur here, but at the end he will lose the game. Martin finishes second, and I at the end am able to win this game. And quite a close and exciting finish here. And now, an interesting game. For most of the early and middle game, I was quite happy about my position. I had many civil actions, I had many science, I had the Silk Road, I did some very nice use out of the Silk Road, I had the railroad, I just thought I need those coals, and then I can get some big production going at some point Antoni Gaudi to transition into culture production, but the coals were very late, which luckily for me did turn out potentially even good, because I got then a very early oil, which again made me confident in my position. However, then there was the iconoclasm. Danny Boy got Pierre in the space flight. Martin got a bit of a culture lead. I did draw some impacts, but maybe not the best ones. And with that, I was worried that maybe the game is running away, or that the other players are running away from me. Still hoping that I have a slot position. And then there was the dwarf from Martin Pêcheur, which certainly is one of the important points in the game, where I actually played it greedy the turn before, but I still was maybe threatening enough strength to not be the target of a war. And with Martin having the shock groups tactic, he was able to go for a big amount of strength. I think it was probably the correct decision for him to go for that war despite of the Olympic Games. But for Danny Boy, of course, it was unfortunate, him having the tactic, and yeah, he got hit by quite a significantly big war. Nonetheless, he almost overtook Martin again, meaning that yeah, he still had quite a strong position, being able to survive a war and still almost not finishing last. And he had a position that, as I said earlier, I thought might run out of steam, but Pierre, of course, and getting the Wonder helped him here, and he got those computers, and taking them I think was a good call, and so he still played a very nice AH3 out of the position that he had going into it. So yeah, interesting game, and I of course was very relieved and very happy that I was able to win that game, which gave me a lot, or a better situation before the finish of the last 4-player game. And we won't take a look at that last 4-player game, because there are still some games from the World Championship finals, and also I plan on covering at least parts, but maybe also the whole next Intermezzo Championship season. Those International Championship games are already a while ago now, so I rather want to put the International Championship aside. So we won't take a look at that 4-player game in another video. Instead, we will now just take a look at how that 4-player game ended and how the International Championship season ended. And maybe if you are really interested in seeing that 4-player game without knowing the end result, then I will maybe put a replay code to that 4-player game as well into the description of the video. So pause the video now if you want to take a look at that game before seeing the standings. If not, you can stick with me, and we will take a look at the final standings now and of the result of that last 4-player game. Alright, here we have all of the games, and let's just scroll a little bit to see the result of the final 4-player game. That was the second last game, the one that we have just taken a look at. And as you can see, I also managed to win that last 4-player game, even with a bit of a lead. To be honest, I already don't remember any longer what actually happened in the game, but I won before Ipogi, Danny Boy, and Takusto. And with that, I was very happy that after a really bad start in the first 5 games, the season at the end had at least somewhat solid result for me, and that I avoided relegation and being able to play in Master again in the next season. Again, congratulations to Grotz for pulling off an extremely strong season. Will be interesting to see how he will be doing in the Grandmaster division in the next season. And yeah, also of course Ipogi was in that group, who will now take a break from tournament play. So nice having the opportunity to battle out some more games before his break. And yeah, also Allfather pulling off a strong season. For Takusto and Danny Boy, the season maybe didn't go ideally, but they have shown on other occasions that they are very strong players. All right, and now, so that is the end of that season for me. But let's maybe also quickly take a look at the Grandmaster division to see which player has won the International Championship this season. And we can see that Daniel played an extremely strong season, also same as Grotz, but in the Grandmaster division, finishing with 36 points, an extremely strong result. I think he actually also covered one of his games of the season on his YouTube channel, so make sure to check that out if you are interested. And then we have Funestus at second place, Chengisip, the old veteran, still playing on a very, very high level, MWI, Lambda, Wolves, and PV4. So definitely some strong, very strong players here, and Daniel playing an incredibly strong season, actually the second best season in the history of the International Championship. Only one player managed to score more points in Grandmaster, and that was Leon C. And that happened in the ancient times before I even started playing through the ages. So yeah, a very great result. And with that, we have now taken. We can now put the International Championship aside. I will cover some games of the Intermezzo Championship soon. I also, of course, am interested to see how those final 2-player games of the World Championship will be going. And then I say thanks for watching, have a nice time, and see you in the next video.